Hello and welcome to another video on aviation meteorology. This one specifically is going to discuss aeronautical decision making, or we call it ADM. ADM basically is an approach, a systematic approach, that you use your mind to consistently or figure out the best course of action for any circumstances that you experience when you fly. So in other words, you systematically go through and make a decision based on all of your options. In the past, this used to be called good judgment, but of course we try and make things more technical, and now we call it ADM. And as you know, most aircraft accidents are a result of pilot error. So what exactly is pilot error? And pilot error is a word that we use to describe an accident where an airplane that's perfectly good an accident happens as a result of the pilot. Pilot is mostly or partially responsible for the accident to occur. And of course, as I mentioned, most aircraft accidents are a result of pilot error. Approximately 80%, they say, is a result of pilot error. So the idea here is to minimize pilot error. In other words, try and reduce the number of accidents that pilots cause by using techniques called ADM, which is aeronautical decision making, and also CRM, which is crew resource management or cockpit resource management. And what crew or cockpit resource management is, of course, as the name implies, it's management. So it's a system where you take all of your available resources, whether it be the airplane that you're flying, the avionics, people that are in the airplane, people that are on the ground, the procedures for the airplane, and use that to make the best decisions to promote safety and enhance the efficiency of flight operations. So in other words, it's an integrated approach, taking all of your available resources and making the best decisions based on that. So the steps for good ADM, and these are not necessarily in order. Number one, identify hazardous personal attitudes. In other words, take stock of yourself. Are you a impetuous person, or are you a timid person? And then based on that, trying to modify your behavior. So that's what learning behavior modification techniques are. Do you have stress frequently? How do you modify or reduce that stress? So that's number three, learning how to recognize and cope stress. Number four, using all resources, and that is part of CRM, crew resource management, all available resources. Number five, evaluating the effectiveness of ADM skills. In other words, besides just making decisions, how good were those decisions that you made? And then finally, number six, developing risk assessment skills. And risk assessment is a very big topic. It's used quite a bit in the military and other locations. We're going to talk a little bit about risk assessment right now. Risk assessment or risk management is where you proactively identify safety-related hazards. So the key word there is hazards, looking for hazards, and then mitigating the hazards that you can accept, and then trying to totally eliminate the hazards that you cannot successfully overcome. So as you can see here on the balls and the process, the first thing that you do is you identify hazards. After that, assess the risks, and are the risks very probable or not so likely to happen? Are they catastrophic, or are they small risks? Then you analyze the controls. In other words, figure out how to minimize those risks or those hazards. Make the decisions, use those controls, and then monitor results and keep going around until you keep identifying hazards, and just keep doing that. So in assessing risks or hazards, you know that you've probably seen aircraft accidents before, and some things are just really rare. Things like parts falling off an airplane, that doesn't happen very often, but they're highly catastrophic. So if they're improbable, but they're catastrophic, it's hard to mitigate those risks, but regardless, we try. Other things can happen all the time, like we see IFR weather all the time here in our locale when we're flying. And so that is probable, and the risk level with low ceilings and low visibilities could be critical, could be catastrophic, depending upon the skill level of the pilot and also the ceiling, how low the ceiling is and how low the visibilities are. So we try and figure out the risk. Is it highly probable or improbable? And if it does occur, if an accident does occur, would it be catastrophic as a result of this hazard or negligible? You really want to avoid the things that are catastrophic and probable and try and minimize anything else that has a high risk or serious risk. So in decision-making process, we have to identify these hazards, assess the degree of risk using our risk matrix, and then figure out the best course of action. Of course, every time we fly, there's a risk. Every time I fly, it's a very high risk to other airplanes. So we don't want to accept any unnecessary risks, but taking off and landing, well, those are risks, so we try and mitigate those risks. In other words, try and do them as safely as possible so that there is no accidents. So with this in mind, researchers in human behavior and aviation have come up with a lot of different types of decision-making models or processes that have models. And you can read through a lot of different textbooks in aviation. The Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge talks about different models. They talk about the 5 Ps, the 3 Ps, OODA, and DECIDE. I'm going to look at just one of these. I'm going to look at the DECIDE process. And the DECIDE process stands for detect, estimate, choose, identify, do, and evaluate. So in other words, as you're flying along, if you notice a change, you detect a change, you have to figure out or estimate how you need to react, need to look at desirable outcomes or choose, identify which action you're going to take, do it, and then how did that affect mitigating the hazard? In other words, evaluate, and then just keep going through that process over and over again.